I'd like to welcome everyone to this online seminar hosted virtually by the Department of Politics here at York University in Toronto. I'm Richard Saunders. I'm Associate Professor of African Political Economy here in the Department of Politics. And I'm also the Director of African Extractivism and the Green Transition, which is the organization research partnership which is sponsoring today's seminar, the China Model of Resource Governance in the Rare Earth Sector, Economic Linkages, and Industrialization as Solution to the Resource Curse. I'd note that this is the first event in our Critical Minerals Seminar series for the 2025-2026 academic year, which just started in September. And it follows the launch of this Critical Mineral Seminar series in the first half of 2025. If you want to know more about the project and more about the seminar series, what's coming up, please visit www.aegt.ca for our schedule, newsletters, policy briefs, and other items which are coming out of our project, which I'll talk about in a minute. We have another seminar coming up on October 23rd, which I'll talk about at the end of today's seminar. But before we begin, although we are meeting entirely online from several cities, regions, and countries, let's pause to acknowledge the geographical and political context of York University, the host of our seminar today. York University recognizes that many Indigenous nations have long-standing relationships with the territories upon which York University campuses are located or in the Toronto area, which precede the establishment of York University. York University specifically acknowledges its presence on the traditional territory of many Indigenous nations in this area known as Takaranto, has long been caretaken by the Anishinaabe Nation, the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, and the Huron-Wendat. It's now home to many First Nation, Inuit, and Métis communities. We acknowledge the current treaty holders, the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation, and note that this territory is subject to the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Belt Covenant, an agreement to peaceably share and care for the Great Lakes region together. So, a few words, if I may, at the outset of the seminar to kind of plug our African extractivism and green transition project so you know what this host organization is about and what we're trying to do. We are a 6-year project funded by the Social Sciences and Humanities Research Council of Canada with a partnership grant. And our main aim is to investigate the dynamics and policy terrain of critical minerals extraction and value chains. We obviously have an African focus, and we have country teams and projects spread across 4 countries, the DR Congo, Tanzania, Zambia, and Zimbabwe. But we have a wider concern for understanding the experiences, debates, and policy innovations around critical minerals in the Global South. And that also includes Canada and Canadian engagement with many of the same issues of global value chains and critical minerals in a changing world environment for their use. We have a couple of key aims, and one is to address research and knowledge gaps around critical minerals and green value chains from an African perspective. And we also look to support emerging policy debates and regulatory experiments in sub-Saharan Africa and beyond, and particularly by engaging with, if you wish, stakeholders at national level and regional level in sub-Saharan Africa to add value, evidence, and help to convene, along with local partners, discussions around policy options and alternatives and trajectories for the way ahead. Our partnership includes organizational partners, co-applicants, collaborators in sub-Saharan Africa, Canada, and Europe, and a large network of student and civil society and independent researchers across those same regions. In 2025, we launched 8 freestanding new research projects under our partnership involving and focused on critical minerals and African producers and African linkages to global value chains. We're really excited about those projects. They're kind of in mid-stride, many of them now, and we will be producing and peer reviewing the results of those projects in early 2026. So please keep your eyes open for that. And we'll be using our website to announce those materials as they come out and the various places where you may engage with them. For further information on our partnership, again, please visit www.aegt.ca. Follow us on social media, subscribe to our newsletters, listen to our podcasts, and welcome all the time to these effectively monthly online and in-person critical mineral seminar series presentations and roundtables. I'd like to thank our AEGT team here in York for organizing this event led by Alex Caramento, who's the project manager for the ATT. Now, the main event. It's my real pleasure to welcome our featured speaker and discussant for today's seminar. First, our featured speaker, Dr. Yingfeng Ji, earned her PhD at the University of Cambridge with research focused on China's investments in Central Asia. She is currently a postdoctoral research fellow in the project Green Industrial Policy in the Age of Rare Metals, Trans-Regional Comparison of Growth Strategies in Rare Earth Mining, known as the acronym GRIPARM. That's led by a great friend of our project, Dr. Julur Nemsing, who's now Principal Research Fellow in Global Political Economy at the School of Global Studies at the University of Sussex. Within that GRIPARM project at Sussex, Dr. G's research focuses on China's industrial policy in the clean mineral sector. A very, very warm welcome to you, Dr. G, or Yingfeng, if I may. It's great to have you with us. Before we get started with your talk, I'd just like to briefly introduce our discussant, my colleague, Dr. Gray Chin, who's Associate Professor of Political Economy in the Department of Politics here at York. And he's a very busy man. He's also Senior Fellow at the Global Development Policy Center at Boston University, at the Foreign Policy Institute at the Johns Hopkins University School of Advanced International Studies, and he's also an associate of well-known LSE Ideas Network. Greg has published widely on the international comparative political economy of China, Asia, and BRICS, which is one of the areas he teaches here at York at graduate level and undergraduate level. And he looks at, in his new forthcoming book, I should say, he will be exploring some of these issues with co-author Kevin Gallagher, and we look forward to that book coming out, Greg, soon, China and the Global Economic Order from CUP. So thanks, Greg, for joining us as well. I'm looking forward to your responses and a lively conversation. For everyone, the format is Dr. G will speak for about 30 to 40 minutes. She has a slide presentation. Greg Chin will offer comments for 15 to 20 minutes. We'll open the floor for discussion. If you would like to ask a question or to bring notice that you'd like to speak, please use the chat box to do so, to request to speak or to send questions. I would note that this meeting is being recorded. So in case that is an issue for any of you, we will send out the link to that recording after this session is done. And I would also note that any chats that you send to us also get recorded as part of the recording of today's session. So that said, everything in order. I'd again like to extend a very warm welcome to everybody who's joining us online. Thank you for your interest, and especially to Dr. Yingfeng Ji and to Professor Greg Chin. Thanks for joining us. I would now like to open the floor and invite Yingfeng to speak. Thanks very much.
Okay, thank you, Richard. Thank you, Alex, for inviting me to deliver this webinar, and thank you for Professor Chin for being the discussant today. I kind of feel that rare earths as a topic is kind of like raising a lot of interest in Canada and also in like other Western countries. And I have just finished my field work lasting over for around 14 months from China. I just came back to UK from the field work, but I have been spending a lot of time in collecting data on the China's rare earth industry, but I don't want to. I think I don't I'm not qualified to claim myself as a China rare earth expert, but I would regard myself as like a lucky scholar at this time when the exchange and the exchange and conversation between China and the West in the rare earth industry has been gradually closing, especially this year. When I wrap up the last round of my fieldwork, I can feel like the interviewees, even some of them I used to meet and discuss before, they're becoming more and more cautious. In this sense, I'm very lucky, and for the China package in the Grip Arm project that this is the paper I'm presenting today on how rare earth industry of China can be a example to counter argue the resource curse theory. Is the first paper of the work of the China work package. In the other two papers, we focus on China's overseas investment. One of them focus on China's overseas investment in the critical mineral sector. One is one, and the third one is a discussion on the new format of the industry policy in the strategic sectors amid the geopolitical rivalry, namely the rare earth sector and the semiconductor sector. And today I'm mostly focusing on the first paper, but if you're interested, that you can you're more than welcome to follow the work of the Grip Arm project. And for as a note that I have been conducting field work in China with the help from my hosting institute in China, Tsinghua University, that and because this sector is a kind it's kind of sector that gradually closing the conversation with the West institutes. So we have designed the research method and data collection methods for this package, called using a method we call it industrial ethnography, that I have been actively attended the industrial and academic um, high profile events in China on the rare earth industry. Additionally, I have been conducting semi-structured interviews with the industry and the academic elites in the industry, as well as the policy advisors in China. In parallel, my co-author, Dr. Sin, has been doing data collection on the consuming countries in America, in North America, and in Japan, as well as Western Europe. That's how. And um, I'm not sure if when rare earth very often goes to the headlines of the newspaper, do I need to put extra notes to introduce it? But just to repeat that the rare earth elements are it's not a single element, but it's a set of 17 nearly indistinguishable soft metals. And what makes rare earth unique and kind well known now is firstly because the rare earth elements they have been widely used in different kind of industries, from the hydrogen storage to the catalyst for petroleum cracking. But most notably is there are four types of the rare earth elements that they are essential inputs in permanent magnets, which play a very important role for the clean technology industries, such as the motors for the EV vehicles, and also wind turbine motors, electric motor generators. They are also such kind such kind of permanent magnet. They are also essential inputs in some products in the defense industry, as well as some emerging technology such as the humanoid robots produced um, such as the humanoid robots. And given the global decarbonization efforts and this kind especially the magnet-based rare earths, they are playing an important role for the future demand of the clean technology industries. And the currently the literature, the most established literature on rare earths focus more on the economic security side, stressing the Western's dependence on China's critical minerals and especially rare earths. And in this literature, we take a more like a development economics approach, discussing the China's approach of discussing China's approach of the industrial governance of the rare earth sector. And another literature, like emerging literature, a group of emerging literature is kind of like the green industry policy literature. In this group of literature, that the scholars emphasize more the opportunities for the global South countries, the mineral countries, that to take the advantage, to take the chance to participate in the global value chain and add value to their minerals and metals. And in this in this paper, Jojo and I take a perspective that we use the rare earths industry of China as an example to show how the industry policy and industry coordination can work to add value for the mineral producing countries, as an example to counter argue the resource curse industry, that the resource curse theory. Traditionally, resource curse has been the resource sector has been regarded as a a problem for the economic development because of the associated political and economic effects from the mineral dependent resource dependence development model, such as the Dutch disease, rent seeking, or its anti-developmental effect on economic development, especially in supporting the expansion of the manufacturing industry. And in this paper, we see China's rare earth industry as an example of mineral producing countries that successfully achieved industrial diversification, in a sense that China has from the 1970s to until 2010s, China successfully upgrade itself from primary products exporting country in the rare earth sector to now like the largest cluster for the world center for the rare earth midstream refinery and separation, as well as the largest manufacturing hub for the rare earth-based material manufacturing. And this figure from a China paper published by a research team I know very well personally, and this figure shows the shows the China's market position in the different sections of the rare earth supply chain. That notably before China rose to the largest rare earth exporting country, it was the U.S. dominating the world rare earth production. But in 1970s and 1980s, in parallel with the tightening of the environmental regulation in U.S. and also the opening up of China's rare earth mines, that China gradually became the largest producer of the mineral oils in 1986. That it surpassed the U.S. becoming the largest exporter of the rare earth ores, and now across the supply chain of the rares in different sections, China has the largest share of it. But it also notably, China is now a pure importer of the rare earths primary products, and it imports rare earth ores from U.S. and also from the other mineral producing countries, working as the world hub for the midstream products and also the downstream products. And was and but in the recycling section of the supply chain, I think rare earth recycling from either the end products such as the EV motors and the other end products, especially the recycling of the permanent magnet, is it's kind of like emerging production activities both in China and in the Western. It follows a different logic, but in China, the recycling mainly focus on the production side because China has the largest production volume of rare earths. So some of the Chinese enterprises, especially the private enterprises, that they don't have the government quota to produce and to refine the rare earths, they can produce rare earths ores. They can produce the rare earth products from the waste liquid from the rare earth SOEs. And but in the West, the rare earth recycling mainly focus on the recycling from the end products. But both recycling from end products, both in China and in the West, they are kind of like the industry just taking shape and waiting to scale. And this is overall of it. And for the research question and the research question and the argument and theory for this article, we use the China model in the critical raw material to argue a counter case for the resource curse theory. Traditionally, as I mentioned before, traditionally resource curse theory argue that the mining and hydrocarbon-based growth generates anti-developmental effects. But the China model in the rare earths show an example of success achievement of the industry, the raw material industry that developed from successfully achieved the industry economic diversification. And we based on Albert Hirschman's linkage building concept, we argue that China has successfully build an example of the by building linkages from the resource sector, that China built an example of economic diversification based on the critical raw material sector. And by the way, Jojo is more the expert on the theory side, so like and because I conducted mostly the field work for the data, so like I comparatively I'm more familiar with the data side, and this table gives the overview of China's rare earth industry policies. To be honest, China's rare earth industry policy, both the orientation and policy objective and instruments has changed has changed um, has changed significantly over time. That like a note to be taken is the first in 1970s to 1991, like a lot of mineral exporting countries, that China has been taken like a mineral export, like encouraging policies for the rare earths or exporting, especially in 1986 that the Chinese government has uh, has issued a policy that encouraging the export tax rebate on rare earth products as well as on the other minerals such as tungsten. That the policy objective was to encourage the export of rare earths to earn foreign exchange reserve to earn foreign exchange as a way to support China's opening up economic opening up at that time. And from 1991, that the 1991 was like kind of like the changing point, and intensively in early 2000s, the Chinese government started to take more restrictive measures on the upstream production of rare earths, and to control and tighten the overcapacity that inherited from the previous period. And from 2010, that the government used more industrial more like industrial regulatory orders to accelerate the industrial consolidation of the sector, that changing the industry from previously composed of the private mining and refining companies, especially the regional, the subnational level enterprises, to a industry that dominated by the six rare earth SOEs. And together with the industrial structural consolidation, the government has been protecting the SOEs using the export quota, production quota, refinery quota, and after two and also another change in 2010s is that the government started to from 2012, the government started to issue some environment regulations to deal with the pollution problem, and with the associate from the rare earth mining and the refinery separation. And after 2018, that's the logic of the policies in this for the rare earth industry changed again. In this paper, we focused more on the post to 2018 section is a brief introduction, while we compared the sector after 2018 with the semiconductor sector in another paper. But after 2018, that the logic of the rare earth in the policies in China started to change to a more to be more responsive to the international dynamic, especially the geopolitical rivalry between China and the US. And very well known this year that the Chinese government to put an export restriction in the new round of trade war against President Trump's tariff on China. And in parallel with the government, the Chinese government tightened the control of the rare earth industry using more like a high-profile regulatory orders, and also more like stricter restrictions on the export of the rare earth products and the rare earth products and the associated technologies, and this give more the details of the industry. In the first phase, as I discussed, as I said, like the Chinese government used the encourage the export of the rare earths, using the export tax rebate policy. And what happened in 1980s was that the government commissioned R&D has achieved breakthrough in the midstream sector. Like before this, China was an exporter of the rare ores, but in the late 1980s, a Chinese professor, a chemist from Peking University of China, called Professor Xu Guangxian. He's called like the father of China's rare earth industry. His team has kind of like achieved a new technology called cascade refinery technology for the rare earths, which can largely escalate the purity of the rare earth elements in the refinery and separation process. And after industrialization, China kind of like after the experimental phase, the technology has been promoted on the industrial level, and in 19 and this gave China the technology advance in the production of the rare earth intermediate products. And in the after the first stage, that the government started to tighten the production on the upstream sector, while building the forward linkages in the rare earth manufacturing. In the restrictive side, that the government declared the heavy rare earth mines which is uniquely produced in China, as the productive mines in China. Also, from 2006, that China started to put export tax, and officially abolished the export tax rebate scheme used in the previous period. But arguably, that the export tax has been used as both a way to restrain the export, but also a way to protect the rare earth SOEs. And also the government has been issuing refinery quota and mining quota. Also, it tightened the mining license. And these handsets of the restrictive tools resulted in the effect that the rare earth material manufacturing, represented by the permanent magnet manufacturers in Japan and in Germany, to secure reliable primary primary products. They have moved to China. They have moved their factory to China. The most representative cases are the Japanese permanent magnet manufacturers. They first started like in late 1990s. The three illuminate material manufacturing from Japan moved to China, and after this, the magnet manufacturers have moved to China. They first started like branches, but later with the shrink of the Japanese with the shrink of the Japanese factories, the Japanese talents in this area also moved to China, which resulted that China is now like the largest manufacturing for the rare earth permanent magnet. China now produce like from last year's data that China produced more than like 90% of the permanent magnets, and also like in the interview I was told that the kind like the rare earth material manufacturing industry for China like rapidly developed in early 2000s, and they were regarded as kind of like a piece of cake falling from the Western advanced manufacturers. And but now after decades of the technology transfer and learning from the Chinese side, I think like I was told that the most of the equipment, the technologies for the permanent magnets manufacturing are like China and the foreign multinationals, like they are on the very similar on the equal level. And this is the second stage that which helped to establish China as a advanced rare earth material manufacturing. And also in the previous stage when China exported the rare earth ores to the world market, because of the encouraging like the resource tax rebate system, as well as the opening up privatization of China's mining in late 1980s. China's China's rare earth industry, especially the mining section, has been mushroomed, and there was and has been growing rapidly at subnational level, and the private mining companies started to enter this sector, which resulted that the China's rare earth products has been sold very cheaply to the international market, which brought unintended consequence in the Western competitors in the rare earth refinery and the mining sections had to shrink and give the market share to the Chinese competitors. And in the third stage after 2011, two big changes of in the industry happened. One is that the one I mentioned, that the government like accelerate the industrial consolidation of the sector. The industrial consolidation, consolidating the industry from like a more like unregulated industrial structure to a more like to an industry dominated by the first six and later to two major rare earth SOEs. The industrial consolidation was designed for three purposes. One is that to address the problem from the previous period, such as the excessive competition and the lack of China's pricing power for the industry. And the other one is the big SOE is regarded has more potential to address the environmental problem, and also the it has and also has more like capacity for to develop like the high end rare earth products. And at the same time that the China's government policies on the demand side, such as the EV motors and also the wind power generation, also the urbanization using the elevators. These measures kind of like give a stimulus for the rare earth materials that of course, this industry, they were not designed like primarily to stimulate the development of the rare earth industry, but it give kind of like de facto push for the demand, for the domestic demand of the rare earths, for China's rare earth materials. So which make China that not only the largest rare earth manufacturing material manufacturing country now, but also the largest consuming country for the rare earth materials. This group of policies that in turn this group of policies in turn across different periods that made China has kind of like a in interview I was often told that it was called the whole supply chain advantage, that that the China can produce at each stage of the supply chain section of the supply chain, can produce products with a very competitive price and very strong network and strong network between the upstream and downstream sectors. And after 2018, that the China's in 2011, China, like Chinese government give a like a short period export embargo on is in a territorial conflict against Japan on the rare earth, that already like arose the global like attention or on the dependency on China's rare earth. But in recent years, the Western has put more efforts on diversifying the critical mineral supply, including the rare earth supply, and reduce dependency on China, and also the global like the demand scenario for the rare earth, the demand scenario for the rare earths has been growing with the global decarbonization efforts and with the demand from the clean technology industries. And in for example, US has been trying to reopen its rare earth mines in the mountain pass, as well as China. The US has been giving the good subsidies to kind of like attract the onshoring of the rare earths of the rare earths separation refinery and the permanent magnet production. I know Japan and Western Europe has been collaborating with the Australian producers, Linus, to expand the Australians production outside, as kind of like as a way to diversify the supply from producers outside China. And but even in and even under a high production scenario, that taking all the existing and proposed projects, that China's share of global magnet rare earth mining output is projected to remain very high, as high as approximately around over 50%, and its share of refining output will be as high as 77% by 2030. That according to the forecast of the IEA. And after 2018, that the Chinese government tightened more the control of the rare earth sector. That apart from the one I mentioned, that the six big rare earth SOEs has been consolidated to two SOEs, one called North Rare Earth, one called China Rare Earth Group. After President Xi Jinping's visit to the production region of rare earth in southern China, that and also the recent regulatory order in this year and last year tightened China's export of the critical mineral overseas investment, as well as the export of the technologies. And also the government started to like the government used to give the production quota to the subsidized affiliated enterprises to the rare earth SOEs, but from this year the quotas are directly given to the two big groups, which give the group more power to control the affiliated enterprises. Also, I think the government kind of like there's not like a sufficient opaque data on China's rare earth overseas mining, but from our data, we think China also give the China also kind of like accelerate its pace together with the Western efforts on overseas rare earth mining. And another thing is like the government used to give refinery quota only on the mines produced inside China, but now the mines imported from abroad has been put under control of the production quota as well. I think these are most of these are like the tiny efforts. No, not no, these it's not tiny efforts. I think more a better way to say it, like these policies, they are not as massive or as the policies into early 2000, when the government started to tighten the control of the industry. But the general trend is that the government further tightened and the regulation of the industry on the basis of the previous policies. And the projects outside China trying to diversify the supply of trying to diversify the supply of rares outside China. These projects in U.S. and in Australia and the other places, they also face challenges such as the environmental compliances. That's an important one, and also financial pressures and and uh, and the overall another background is the overall change of the kind of I think Professor Cheng is probably the expert on China's like industrial policy on this side, that but some recent changes under the geopolitical rivalry background, that we can see that there is some there are some like changes of China's rare earths, not rare earths, but the overall industry policy tones, that the government give more like stress more the power of the whole like a national system. Like for example, there are some policy slogans called the new system for mobilizing resources nationwide, stressing more like mobilizing powers and resources from different type of enterprises to get through more like the critical challenges and the tasks facing by the country. And also the in the resource the in the resource governance side, that the resource governance including the controlling power of the strategic resources, as well as the kind of like supply chain resilience of the resources, has been kind of integral part of the overall economic development system, or the industrial policy system for whole China. And I will stop here. And I think mostly what challenges me for this like for this framing of this paper is, firstly, I feel, and also I was always asked whether the China model can be a model for the other countries. And another thing is, I think like this in the presentation today, I talked a lot about the post 2018 scenario, but in this article we included like the evidence from the pre 2018 period. But I'm also thinking like, is there a way to make the logic more coherent for the post 2018 period to be included in the either the linkage building or the resource curse framing for this paper? So I will stop here. Thank you for listening, and I look forward to the questions and discussions. Shall I stop showing here? Yeah.
Yes. Thanks very much, Yingfeng. There's certainly a lot to think about there. It's fascinating data that you've collected, an interesting time frame approach. I think we will hopefully address some of the issues in answer to your question at the end, how to integrate the post-2018 period into your analysis of earlier periods. I think that's a nice point of departure, perhaps, for a framing of questions going forward. But in the meantime, uh, I'd like to invite Greg Chin to offer some comments. He's read one of the papers based upon this material, and he's present. Glad to have you with us, Greg, and looking forward to your input as well.
Okay, great. Thank you, Richard and Dr. G, Yingfeng, if I may. I'll just start by saying thank you for your presentation. And I read a chapter which I think you and your co-author have contributed, I guess, to Richard's handbook. So I don't yet have a chance. I haven't had a chance yet to read your longer version, I guess, the paper, and I understand that this may be a kind of two-stage thing where like you're working, you've focused a lot on the inside story, inside China, and then you're going to do as you say, the other second and third parts, which are about kind of Chinese investment outwards and the global story. So I'm conscious that I'm probably catching you as you move from the book chapter to the longer paper and still developing your thinking as you were saying, um, and that you have a division of labor between you and your co-author of sorts, between who's doing more of the theory and who's doing the field research. So I just want to be fair and just laying that out, that I'm trying to be conscious of all that, as far as where I'm coming from when I comment today. I'd like to give you comments to your very interesting presentation. I think you're doing really important work with Richard's big project. I'll try to give you comments kind of from three dimensions. One, as a China scholar. Two, from a comparative perspective, comparative political economy, comparative politics. And third, from a kind of more global IPE, international political economy perspective. Let me begin from the kind of China studies angle. I really think your research and the field research that you've done and the telling of the China story that you've painstakingly, I think, worked on, I'm guessing for your doctoral work when you were at Cambridge. Cambridge is a great place to do serious China work. People like Peter Nolan are there and I think established a great tradition. And I can see the serious field research that you've done, and where you're really looking at 4 to 5 decades of this evolving story inside China, across 4 phases of evolution, as you've described it. And there's a lot going on. I think you've dug out some really important elements of the empirical story about key actors, scientists who've made breakthroughs, different government policies at different periods, intended and unintended consequences over these various phases, how Chinese ministries have intersected, of course, state enterprises, so there's a lot going on, and I think you've done a really serious, some really serious engagement with the China story. And as a China scholar, I thank you for that, for your research. It's often when we're doing our doctoral studies that we can dedicate so much time and energy to go into the field and do the type of research that you did. And also, I could see you were in Fujian and Baotou and Yunnan, and you weren't just in Beijing or you weren't just in Shanghai. You were across China, and talking to key participant observers, strategists inside China. And as you say, it was really great you did it when you did it, because as we know, this has become more and more sensitive area of work with the geopolitical tensions with the United States and the West. So I think you got there at a good time to do the research, and thank you. It's very not easy to do this type of field research in China to begin with, and then it's just become more challenging in some ways. So I think you really should be commended for the good field research. And for those who may not have had a chance to read it, I think you've done a really nice job of drawing on your field research and mapping out this China story. And your use of sources, not only the interviews, but the Chinese language sources. I can see you've done, you've drawn a lot, and the policy statements and the, very important State Council and others. Sometimes people don't take the policy statements from China seriously. Now, by people, I mean scholars, Western scholars. They say, well, it's Chinese propaganda. Well, the reality is this is Chinese policy. And if you understand anything about China, the policy matters because it sends directions to, the huge 7-layer Chinese party state. It sends signals to all the officials and party cadres about what they're supposed to be doing. What are their priorities? What are their objectives? What are they supposed to be focused on? And, of course, the challenge is what are the intended or unintended results that flow from all that policy. And I think you've done a nice job of your process tracing, as you said in your piece. The second part of my comments, and Richard, stop me if I'm going on too long, have to do with the comparative dimensions and the CPE and the IPE. And here I think you've done a really nice job, you and your co-author, of pushing back on the resource curse narrative and saying how China's broken beyond that. I think there's two tensions in your research agenda that I can sense. One, like the resource curse pushback. Okay, I think you've done a great job in showing how China has been able to kind of get beyond that, especially by going beyond extraction to actually also doing the processing and the manufacturing and the value added. So the whole supply chain, right? The whole value chain, as you say. I think the tension is where you try to talk about a China model for all the reasons that you've already, and you alluded to this in your conclusion, that you get asked this question. And this would, of course, be the obvious question from comparative politics and comparative political economy. To what degree is the Chinese story unique, an exception? Can anyone else replicate any of this? Are any of the lessons or experiences of China transferable to any other developing country of comparable characteristics? What would that country be? And maybe that's why I studied the BRICS, because it's hard to figure out who are the comparable comparisons. But then it's kind of like, well, if it's an exceptionalism story, then you just kind of have to focus on China's exceptionalism. And it's really not a model for anyone. And I have to be honest with, or at least frank and fraternal, I tend to be skeptical of trying to draw out any idea of a China model for others, maybe because I tend to focus so much in the weeds on what happened inside China. But we know also the Chinese themselves, the scholars have been very skeptical about talking about a China model, right? We know Joshua Ramo Cooper and Shike Yuan, right? The Chinese Academy of Social Sciences over 20 years ago debated Beijing consensus, China model, or what? Right? This is Yu Keping, Huang Ping, Cui Zhiyuan, and others, right? And they've been debating this for a long time. Is there such a thing, the China model? Because then it's kind of like comparison for similarity. Who else would be similar to China? And I noticed in your chapter, very interesting, you said actually China, by occupying both the it shares some characteristics with some of the suppliers, right? The extractors, Africa, Latin America, Chile, and in Africa. But then China also occupies the processing side, right? The value-added manufacturing and, the processing. So it actually looks more like the US. So China's got both sides of the spectrum, as you say, which then raises the question, well, then who is this China model for, if anyone? Right. So I tend to be more, like focusing in on probably it's more an exceptionalism story. But I think it'd be really interesting to hear your thoughts on this. Right. And, and the other tension that I noticed in the narrative is when you, I guess maybe your co-author, you try to apply Hirschman, right? Disequilibrium, uh, chain of disequilibria, and the unbalanced growth idea of Hirschman, which I'm sympathetic to. I like this idea that, development, there's a haphazard quality to it. It's not all central planning, like linear modernization theory, that you can just invest in a big way and then you will get your big bang out of all that in a very linear progression kind of developmental fashion. I think it is more messy than all that. Unintended consequences, intended, there's breakdowns, there's cycles, there's disequilibria. So I'm sympathetic to Hirschman. But when I read the details of your narrative on the China story, it tends to be heavy on the China success side, right? Like China was able to do this in the 70s, then this in the 80s, and this in the 90s, and this in the 2000s. And it's a kind of, and I understand why, like the focus on this, right? And when you're speaking with the Chinese interviews, they're going to explain to you, like, that Beida professor back 30 years ago, 40 years ago, he came up with, he made the breakthrough on this scientific discovery. And it is, as we go back and write the history, so the story of the past, we tend to give it a certain logic that unfolds. You do mention that there are periods, like there's environmental catastrophes, there may have been some corruption, like when there was too many small companies, they were doing, things that were devastating the environment, and, and there was cleanup phases and consolidation phases where the party state came in and forced consolidation, right, to kind of macro and micro manage. And so I sit here and I little bit wondering, from Yingfeng's empirical story, which I think is very rich and detailed and quite accurate, probably, having studied the industrial policy of China and other sectors, automotive, I did it, 30 years ago as a graduate student. I can see, the quality of your story, of your China narrative. I'm just not sure that your empirical actually proves the Hirschmanian story of disequilibria. And the reason why I say that is I think from your story, and then especially as you draw out your 4 phases, it may start with kind of the haphazard nature of kind of disequilibrium. But it looks like, as from the 2000s onward, it's a story where more and more there's state coordination and party coordination, right? And it proceeds under President Xi Jinping. It starts the late Hu Jintao Wen Jiabao period, it seems like, from your empirical story. But there's an effort to consolidate, as you say, and you give the detail on the data, the industry sector consolidation. And there's more and more state coordination as China realizes that actually, we can gain leverage, right, from occupying two sides of this story, the extraction and the processing. And then when the US decides to fight trade wars with China, Trump 1.0, you say that then China starts to, further more and more, right? You talk about how MOFCOM dances a little bit very carefully, whether they should be imposing quotas or not, or I can't remember the tariffs, or, there was some type of trade controls, right? You said they were very careful under Trump 1.0, but then things change under Trump 2.0. Under Biden, and then because Biden continues much of Trump 1.0, in fact, intensifies the trade war and the tech war, right? We know that. Also, Trump then escalates further, and you say China then responds, right, by, upping their game on the coordination and the controls. So it seems that you actually move from a disequilibrium story to a much more kind of new type of state planning and coordination phase of the last 20 years, right? And I don't have the answers for all this, Yingfeng. China scholars have been, as you know, we've been asking these questions for 20, 30 years. We don't have clear answers on, is there a China model? Is there not a China model? What is it? State capitalism? What is that? Right? The Communist parties doesn't say it's building capitalism in China. They're building socialism with Chinese characteristics. So what type of planning is emerging, as you say, in the latest period under President Xi? Right? The new policy priorities. There's even more strategic coordination, as you say. So I think you've got a really interesting story here. The last point. So you can sense my skepticism about China model, but the last point, and I'd be interested in hearing your thoughts on it. I would probably dispense with China model, but that's your call. The last thing is the global story, right? As China invests globally. And I think there's some really interesting things. I noticed, maybe Richard followed this, like last week, the African Union is trying to come out with a coordinated position on rare, like critical minerals extraction and coordinating across the supplier countries, because from what the Reuters said, the African countries want to gain some leverage to be able to push the developed countries to meet their climate change financing commitments and move some of the processing to Africa and provide money so that Africa is not trapped in the resource curse. But Reuters also report this is also aware of China-US growing competition, so the African countries want to work together more and more. So if that's the case, and if the African countries can succeed, because we know there's tensions at times, right? They can undercut each other and they may not coordinate despite the African Union. How does that fit into your story, about whatever China will try to do going out with FDI, foreign investment into, or, maybe it helps, right? It helps China, in fact, right? Because if China's willing to invest in value-added processing in Africa, and let's say the Europeans and the Americans are not, they prefer to just keep buying the stuff from Africa and, the resource curse, maybe China will be advantaged further. And that might be an interesting angle. It's just a hypothesis. So I'll stop there, Richard. I've probably gone on too long.
It was perfect, Greg, within your time. Thanks very much. Lots to talk about there. Thanks very much indeed. Yingfeng, would you like to respond initially to Greg before we open up for further questions from the floor?
Sure. Thank you so much, Professor Chen. I have indeed learned a lot. That like on your, I can feel your your rich experience on China studies on the, and also you give me also your discussion on the the overseas scenario has given me a lot of new thoughts on the the next paper. We have indeed has been maybe I will start from the last point that we have been indeed in the last round of the field work. I have been indeed exposed to kind of the policy, China's policies on the overseas mining processing. and how it conflicts with the resource nationalism policies in the mineral countries. That will be a very interesting angle from my view, that how China's national policy regulating the overseas mining and also processing investments how it create conflicts, and also how it creates either social and economic impacts for the host countries. And also on the China model problem, as I said, this is a question that every time when Jojo or I present this paper, the audience and also the colleagues will ask this question. I think from my view, maybe I'm a too young China studies scholar to answer this question, but in my humble opinion, that I don't think the state coordination, which plays a vital part on China's industry policy, that part is questionable whether it can be applied to other countries with different levels of the institutional capacity. But from this paper, from the resource industry, what we can see very interestingly is from what China has done, from regulating or restricting the activities on the upstream mining, and asking the foreign investor multinationals to transfer technology and build the more value-added manufacturing. We can see very similar efforts in some mineral abandoned countries, but these kind of countries, they are mostly has kind of a big market share, or has the market power or the market share in the certain type of the minerals, such as Indonesia, has been regulating for more nickel processing in Indonesia. I think such kind the other more the policy elements level, that I think some of the policies can be applicable to other countries. But from this industry, as I said, in the handbook chapter, I talked more the unintended consequences. I think the overall development of the China's rare earth industry was very lucky in that way, that it happened in a globalization period of the world economy, that the global trust of the global economic networks, and the opening up of China's market, and the entry of the Western rare earth material manufacturers, they entered China's market without doubting the problem of dependency, or I think that's it's not only the internal characteristic of the China model itself, but also the change of the overall external environment, which kind of restricted the chances of successful learning of this model in other countries. That even I remember one top level Chinese expert of the rare earths told me that you should remember, this is a very short period of economic interdependence and global trust in the whole world economic history, that the relocation of the polluting in the environment intensive industry, such as the rare earths mining and production, from the Western country, from US and other countries, got moved to China. And also the technology transfer of the downstream material manufacturing companies from the West moved to China, happened in China. All this happened in kind of the golden age of the globalization. So in that way, I think it's the external circumstance of the world economy has changed, which making it very hard for the mineral abundant countries to achieve the same level of the market position of China's rare earth industry, even with the same in the institutional capacity, and even with the same level coordination and design of the policies. So that's the point. And also I think in the on the Hirschman's view that in this paper we discussed in the article, we discussed more the period from 1970s, the three phases, not the fourth phase, the post 2018 phase. But because we don't want to give the I don't want a paper. We don't want a paper that stopped in 2018, 5-6 years ago. So that's why we give a bit supplementary data for the in the article. But the main point of the article was still the three phases of linkage building. But also because in the seminars I was asked the audience were very interested in the post 2018 scenario, so that's why I kind of elaborate a bit in the webinar, but it was not elaborate the same way in the article. And okay, did I address all the questions? And yeah, thank you, and thank you again for very I think for very interesting source, especially the part on the China model and the debate inside China on the Beijing consensus is kind of beyond my, not beyond my age, but kind of I was not I was I didn't remember very deeply about the debate, but kind of your information gave me kind of a very good, very important lesson on that. And I will also cross check that debate to kind of to have more to kind of to inspire myself more on the China model question.
Yes, nobody will blame you for not being present at the original discussion, but we can still engage. Thanks for a very comprehensive response to Professor Chin. I have some questions of my own, but I'd also initially like to open the floor up to anybody else who might have some questions. We have a chat message. Alex, I'm not reading them. If you could chip in, and we also have a hand up from Eva Marie Nag. So as Alex is monitoring the chat, Eva, would you like to pose some questions? And then Peter Estrada. Eva?
Oh, hi. Sorry, I should have put it in the chat. Sorry, I just kind of raised my hand. Sorry about that. Greg, thank you so much for your interesting comments, and we're collaborators, so it's always nice to see Greg. Dr. G, that was a really fascinating presentation. I'm the editor of Global Policy Journal, and I have an editorial interest in this also because of the articles we get on this topic. So I really have a question about, not particularly Hirschman, but going back to sort of Hobbes a little bit. The two narratives that seem to come through a lot when it comes to this topic, and you flagged it in your presentation, which I really enjoyed. So one is the kind of narrative of resources and the decoupling of extraction from development, right? So that's a big narrative being pushed right now by China, in China and outside. And you ended the presentation with a focus on the security resource nexus, right? Which is the kind of new Hobbesian element I see. When you did your fieldwork, did you notice a tension between these narratives? Did you sort of sense that policymakers were divided on, if push came to shove, what they'd have to go with? In other words, do you push the agenda of decoupling, given also, a sort of the overall policy trajectory, or is it that under Trump too, the security resource nexus now is going to loom that large that it might actually push aside other policy considerations? I'm just curious whether you noticed any tensions inside the country when doing your field work? Thank you.
Thank you for your question, Eva. I think among the, like, because in China, the rare earth academics is a small circle of experts. They also kind of like play a role of policy advising in China. So I think in this sense, I can sense some indirect ideas, thoughts from them. I think inside the rare earth industry or inside the rare earth experts team, when I began my field work, I can feel they are more like not all of them, but they were sympathetic about the the collaborative side of this industry. And also like in the Trump 1.0, like in the first like term of President Trump's, like in the first round of the U.S. China the trade war, that I think the rare earth was deliberately not used as kind of like a strategic card against U.S. And but it kind like now is kind like a de facto, or it already become a fact of using rare earths as kind like an instrument beyond the economic rationale anymore. I think it's kind of like accepted now in that way, that the industry has more like implications beyond this, beyond the industry itself, and it has more like a significance for like the geopolitical rivalry. So I think indeed there were some like disagreements among the Chinese experts, but now I think especially this year, I think it's kind of like it's accepted in this way.
Eva Marie, would you have any follow-up?
No, plenty. I'm hoping there'll be more discussions on this, and you'll be setting up more seminars because that's really interesting. And
Yeah.
especially because good field work is really hard to come by now. So, like Greg said, it's amazing you have the data, and I hope you can build on it also going forward with your, hopefully, people who trust you now enough to say, and then you can report back because, that'd be topic for another conversation. Thank you very much for your answer. It sort of confirms what I thought. Thank you.
Thank you. Peter Estrada, could I call on you, please? Peter, if you could unmute yourself. Peter, are you there? And if you are, could you unmute yourself, please? Oh, you're having an issue unmuting. Okay. As you go to unmute, let me raise a question from the chat text. It's from one of our PhD students at York, Ezra May, and she has a few questions for you, Dr. G. She says, you highlighted in your presentation how central innovation and technological advancement have become in shaping China's approach to resource management. I was wondering, to what extent do technological innovations in the extraction, processing, and supply chain of REEs drive policy changes in China's current model? Additionally, second question, are there prospects for an automated REE industry model in China? And how well prepared do you think China is to compete in this emerging innovation landscape compared to its Western counterparts? Those are two questions from Ezra One here at York.
Thank you for the question. Because I'm not the technical expert on this, so I'm not confident to give like an exact answer to this. But from what I know from the industry, that I think the rare earth industry is quite already quite automated in China. and the government and the industry itself is betting on more like linking up the downstream and the emerging and and applications such as the humanoid robots and also the what's it called, the low latitude flying, like the helicopters. um I think the innovation, what I feel, the innovation of the rare earth industry, like put a lot of efforts weight on this. And also the central, let me read, what it's technical innovations in the structure and the extraction side. I think I didn't have thought on the extraction technology, but I think there was one indigenous technology breakthrough in China, was the one kind, like extraction method, particularly for the heavy rare earths, produced in southern China. That the China has a way that can put chemicals directly to the soils to get to kind of like to get the rare earth elements out, to get the rare earth mixed elements out. That is kind of like one indigenous technology for China's rare earth extraction. But also I think the confidence of the rare earths, like the processing, the one I mentioned on the separation and the refinery, give the government confidence that to regulate for more like a value up from the primary products exporting to the intermediate production manufacturing, and leverage for its market power for more like a downstream technology transfer. And I think I have answered this question.
Great. Thanks very much. We seem to have lost Peter Estrada. He's gone offline. So Chris Stevens, a PhD student here at York, has his hands up. And after that, we have some text questions from Dr. Rene Lowenson at Training and Research Support Center in Harare, Zimbabwe. So Chris.
Yeah, thanks a lot for the talking thing. It was very interesting. And I think my question is actually really related to Dr. Lowenson's question about these issues of health impacts and how they are dealt with, externalized, things like that. And I know it's, exceptionally hard to discuss in the context of China, but I was wondering about what you had seen in your fieldwork about kind of levels of local participation in, the decision making surrounding these environmental consequences. Because I know you mentioned the consolidation around, a small number of SOEs as making environmental concerns easier to deal with or more readily available to deal with. But is this kind of in what I hate to say, the normal mode of Chinese top-down decision-making and diktats coming from the state and from these SOEs, are health impacts kind of a central government and SOE design problem and solution, or are communities around the, mines, around the processing, around the recycling areas actually integrated in any way into these health and environmental consequence solutions?
Great. Thanks, Chris. Dr. G, before you respond, if I could read the questions which are related to Chris Stevens' points from Dr. Rene Lowenson, the director of the Training and Research Support Center in Zimbabwe, whose work in our project focuses on health impact assessment surveys for actioning around critical minerals. And her project has looked at health impact assessment survey targets and research in 4 countries in Southern Africa. So Dr. Lowenson says she's had difficulty making verbal input because of the connection, but she wanted to raise a few issues. So, and she says one element of the resource curse is the impact on people, health, social well-being, both short and long term, and the externalizing of social impacts. It's interesting that you covered environmental impacts as an issue, but not these kinds of human impacts. Was it ignored, or is it now being integrated into work? Are health impacts assessed in the current processes? This is proving to be an issue in China's investments in the critical mineral sector in low-income countries, and notably in our own experience in sub-Saharan Africa. It also raises, as another form of externalization, the question of post-closure issues of mines. Beyond recycling, which you said is emerging, what about the duties for post-mine closure rehabilitation and China's multi-scale and multi-level investment and engagement in critical minerals in that context at the point of extraction? So thank you for the question, Dr. Lowenson, and I'll put those two together for you, Dr. G.
Thank you. For this paper, we focus more, like I admit the resource curse has its different perspectives, aspect that from the social aspect, from the environment, also political, rent-seeking, corruption, and also the economic. But for this paper, we focus more the economic side, which defines on the anti-developmental effect on manufacturing side and the dependence on the resource exporting model. But from the conversation side that the industrial consolidation has indeed improved the environment problem significantly compared to like 1990s when a number of the small companies rushed to do mining and earn dollars from the rare earth exporting. That from the field sightseeing from the in the like the northern rare earth group, the one of the two largest rare earth groups in China, that they have been using very they have been using very kind of advanced technology production lines to deal with the waste and also the waste waters producing from their rare earths. And also it's quite interesting to know that the rare earth production in China, the industry originally was a way to deal with the iron tailings. Like the rare earth is a byproduct from the iron tailings produced in the same mining areas. So producing utilizing the rare earth elements from these tailings was the start of the rare earth industry in China. And also on the post-closure rehabilitation, that I mentioned that in the most of the open minings was associated with the heavy rare earth mines in 1970 and 80s in southern China. But that traditional way of mining was forbidden, and instead a new method called in-site leaching has been adopted without opening the surface, that opening the surface, that the underground the minerals can be dissolved and pumped to the surface for processing. So in that way there was no demand for the post-closure rehabilitation. But that's my general impression on the environmental problem. But because I'm not like a expert on the like environment, the post mining environment governance, so I'm not sure like if I can give a exact like a technical description of it. But but overall my impression is quite like I'm quite like positive about that. And also I think there is an interesting thought for me for a long time was like in US and especially in US the closure of the rare earth mines and the processing facilities in US and in Western happened in a period when the government tightened the environment regulations on the radioactive radioactive waste from the rare earths. So I'm very confused by like the reopening of these facilities, how the I'm not sure if it's because the uh technical side of the waste governance or the environmental problems from these projects has been improved, or the environmental compliance now was loosened because for security reasons. So I think like in not only in China the environmental compliances and in the new projects in the developed economies as well as in the new emerging mining countries is more other problems worth investigation. Yeah.
Yeah, if I could just, ask you to maybe speak a bit more about the health impacts and the externalization of those issues and how they might be incorporated, or you don't think there's a taste for that. It would certainly be part of, in the African context, which I'm more familiar with, it would certainly be more amenable to the kinds of research, discussion, and in some cases, regulatory changes, which have been taking place around the extractor sector in Central and Southern Africa. Is there any, this was not part of your research at all, but is this something that might be included going forward? Because on the ground in these extractive countries, it's often grouped together, the health impact assessments, it's often grouped together as part of environmental impacts, but it's actually quite a different set of factors and impacts and the kinds of redress which are required are also different and with different regulatory terrains. So could you just address that perhaps a bit more from Dr. Lowenson, who's working in this area in Southern Africa?
Yes, to be honest, I think I didn't meet across like a research on like the health impacts on associated on rare earth mining. I think there were articles and researches on the like the environmental governance, and also there were discussions in one of the events, there were discussions on the level of the underground water pollution and the changes of it after policy. But I didn't see much or any works assessing the health impacts on the local neighborhood.
Health meaning, of course, not just
Yeah.
medical health, but also social well-being and livelihoods, things like this. So beyond environment. So it's anyway, if you haven't seen anything on this, quite interesting. And in Southern Africa, it's becoming more of an issue. It's a standalone issue from environment. Thank you for that. Peter Estrada has been very patient, and he's back and has fixed his microphone problem. So Peter, can I call on you, please?
Yeah, so the question I have is how essential are critical minerals in developing AI for China's economy? And how will AI production impact developing countries that have trade agreements with China?
Let's see. I think critical minerals, not only rare earths, they are critical because they are critical inputs for some emerging industries, including the clean technology I mentioned. But I know some Chinese research team, they are doing like the material flow of the rare earths, all the 17 types of the rare earth elements that they are used as like critical components or elements added in the semiconductors and some other products for the AI for like essential for the AI industry. And also China has been like at macro level, China has been like working to play a more active role in the global governance, that the AI, I think the AI governance with African country was one aspect of it. But because myself is not because the material flow document on the from rare earths to the semiconductor is kind of like, I know it's an internal document that I didn't have the chance to read that. But I know like they are essential inputs for the semiconductors and for some other components used for the AI industry. And also, I think last year or 2 years ago, that China has put like export restrictions on to other not rare earths, but to other critical minerals on to on Netherlands. I think that two critical minerals are essential inputs for the EDA as well.
Peter, would you have any follow-up?
No, I think that answered my question. Thank you very much.
Thank you
Thanks.
for the question, Peter.
I open the floor to any others, either by chat or raising your hand or just coming on screen so we can see you. Are there any further questions, Greg?
Thank you. Yingfeng, sometimes when I work on some of these more sensitive sectors in the Chinese economy, publishers will want to say, well, what about the military? How do you build this into your story about China, right? And in this rare earths and critical minerals, obviously you mentioned in your paper, it's not only for EVs and solar and renewables, but also maybe dual use or national security, defense. In your interviews, I know this is somewhat sensitive, but have you thought about this at all as part of your overall narrative? I know this is the hardest thing to get at and not easy to write on. Would you be willing to say anything about this?
Thank you. It's very, very hard question, I would say. And I think after this year's the export restriction on the 7 type of the medium, the heavy rare earth elements, there were I saw an article like justifying the policy, saying that like these 7 types of the rare earth element, they have the kind like they are the dual use minerals that used both in the military and the civilian products. So I know some of them are used in the and they are the public. These are the public sources. But I can't tell very exactly on which type of the like how specifically. I think it's not the secret. It's not the secret. The secret from the China side, but more the secret from the demanding side, the consuming countries like in US, how they use the rare earths in like F-35. But I know some of them are used to in the ceilings, the coating of the jet fighters, and also some of them are used as in the concealment, is it called concealment like surfaces of them, like some of the defense products. I think that's all. That's also. I think that's also one kind like approximation on the motivation of the rare earth mining and processing projects outside China. Like if whether there were discussion like whether they are for if they are not that commercially competitive, will it be sufficient to like fulfill the military demand of rare earths, like, and to serve the national security purpose?
Thank you, Yingfeng. That's fascinating stuff. I like because we even hear about maybe China will invest in Africa, right? And processing of rare earths linked to these, as you say, these sensitive issues of trade and national security from the buyer side, right? And ultimate export destination if it's Western Europe or US. But yeah, also because when I read your chapter, you mentioned economic statecraft, right? So then I just thought of, I know everyone talks about it these days, but just yeah. So thank you, Yingfeng.
Thank you,
Thank
Professor.
you. I'm going to exercise my chair's privilege and have a follow-up question to Greg's. The focus of our project is on Africa, African extractivism, critical minerals, and where and how different producers might best fit into global value chains and move up them, and what that looks like. And in different countries that we're working in, it looks very different because of we've got different minerals and metals which feature in different degrees in these countries. So my question is in that context and things which have been happening lately, and it's not just about Trump version 2, but it's also something was mentioned earlier, the increasing attention by the African Union and key mineral producers in the African Union at national level, at national policy level, around the implications of the global green transition for them, global supply chains, and how they might fit into that. There had been 15 years ago an African mining vision, and there's kind of a revised version of that, which is focused entirely on green minerals and the energy transition, and where African governments might think of blueprints for best practices to fit in to take advantage of global value chains for beneficiation, employment effects, technology transfer, and so forth. China obviously will feature very importantly in real terms in that strategy. We've also seen Indonesia was mentioned. We've also seen other cases like Indonesia, where cobalt production, Indonesia suddenly is world number 2 cobalt producer, was incorporated in some ways by inclusion into the Chinese domestic supply chains and industries through transfer of technology, investment and trade involving Indonesia, which is quite a resource nationalist country. And China managed to use statecraft and investment and technology transfer to get beyond that wall of resource nationalism, which, as you may know, is also an issue in many sub-Saharan African countries. Export bans on lithium, for example, unprocessed lithium in Zimbabwe, issues of this popping up in DRC. So the resource nationalist issue in Southern Africa, the example we see recently of Indonesia and Chinese investments and what that's done for Indonesia, not just for cobalt production, but for production of electric vehicles using cobalt and others in Indonesia. These kinds of things are creating a new space, it feels like, in Southern Africa to think about policymaking differently. And then you have the geopolitical competition with Trump, China, and others. And I'm just wondering, if you could reflect upon what you think that might mean for a new phase in Chinese economic diplomacy, critical minerals diplomacy. It already has strong relationships on many fronts with the African Union, but is this an opportunity for China to regain some space where it had been excluded from some of the critical minerals kind of beneficiation processes like battery component assembly or development in DRC. China initially said that it was going to do was pushed out by the Americans using the United Nations to get in and to establish the idea of industries there for processing cobalt and copper. Does this new set of circumstances with Trump, with the AU, with examples of Chinese cooperation with other countries like Indonesia and the lure of African critical minerals, does it create a new ground for thinking about critical mineral diplomacy in a different way in an African context? Have you picked up anything like this, or do you think it's something we might consider pursuing as we move ahead with new research next year in the AEGT? And sorry for the long roundabout question, but
Thank you, Richard. That's a very interesting question. And also, like Professor Chen Ling, like the collaborator for the AGT from Tsinghua University, the collaborator for the AGT package, and together, like one was in her like institute, and one was in China. We have been conducting interviews on the China's critical mineral companies, asking about like their overseas investment, and some of them like for example, one of the cobalt company has been investing in DRC, and also we have interviewed some lithium mining company. I think from the general impression, like in the mining section, I think China already has a like very obvious footprints in Africa, if you agree with me. But for the more like in the more processing section, and also more the more like downstream, like the battery, and even the vehicle like assembly and manufacturing side, the picture is quite more. It's different like across industries and sections, I would say. For the processing, I think what now happens is kind of like opposite to what I would expect, that the China has like the Chinese government has issued the new like the catalog for the like restricted technologies to be exported overseas. I think in that catalog, some of the mineral processing and refinery has been restricted to be exported, and that catalog was issued this year, I think. So I think in the intermediate products production and the mineral processing level, I think there will be more like restrictions on the Chinese overseas investment. But from the more downstream side, I think I can like from the enterprises that we interviewed, and also from the overall data we have, I think they are like the Chinese enterprise, they're quite active to expanding their activities in that. And also infrastructure side, I think they are also like the mining companies. As the mining companies, they are quite active in power generation and power storage in Africa as well, I would say that. So infrastructure side, I think there are some positive news. Yeah, and so I think in the future, the conflicts between the kind of like economic diplomacy or the overseas investment regulation from the home country, and the resource nationalism policies in the like in the host country will be like the interaction between them will be an interesting angle. And another thing, I don't have evidence or for that, but I'm quite interested to say that like the established mining projects invested by the Chinese like started early in Africa. I think like probably in the geopolitical rivalry context, there will be more like a pushbacks from the Western competitors. And so for example, it kind of makes sense, like if the Western is investing in a rare earth mine outside China, the purpose is to diversify the supply. But if it involves Chinese stakeholder, like it kind of like it kind of and like make the Western the diversification efforts less effective. So I think there will be more conflicts on this as well.
Interesting. Well, please follow us at the AGT as we look at some of these issues in terms of supply chains in the year ahead. We've come to our time. It's perfectly. It's now 12:59 here in Toronto. I would just like to say thank you once again for a really insightful, rich presentation, really interesting paper, lots to talk about, lots to think about going forward. We're looking forward to seeing the paper published in various forms. So thank you, Dr. Yingfeng, and thank you, Greg, my colleague, from a valued colleague here at York, for your very interesting, engaging discussion for the follow-up questions. Thank you so much. And I'd like to thank everybody online, those who asked questions and those who've been with us for the last 2 hours. It's great to have you with us. Can I say in closing that the next seminar in the series will be a roundtable. It'll be in person and hybrid on October 23rd, and it's a roundtable on the two Bill 5s, a federal Bill C5 and on Ontario government's Bill 5, which are looking in various ways at critical mineral extraction and Indigenous sovereignty and issues of that kind. So it's a Canadian-focused seminar, and we've got a nice group of people who will be joining us in the roundtable. Look for further details on that on our website, but I can tell you right now it'll be on October 23rd, and we're looking forward to that. But for now, thanks once again for great presentations and responses, and thanks everyone for joining us. And please follow us on www.aegt.ca. Thanks to everyone. Goodbye. We'll be sending out to everybody who's registered a recording and transcript of today's session. Thank you so much, and have a great day, everyone.
Bye.